Hi guys, it's Sam from Made by Ireland. Today we're doing the newest pattern by Sewfisticated Craft Designs. This is the Sewfisticated Ellie Wallet. I'm super excited to do this one with you. Like all of Jassie's patterns from Sewfisticated Craft Designs, this pattern comes with a few different options. I've only got the one here to show you guys, mainly because I've already gifted the other one away. Sorry. So this is style 2. There's 4 styles that come with the pattern, and of the 4 styles you can also even personalize it further, I guess, to make it even more different. So for example, these two are the same style. These are both style 2s, but as you can see, I've mirrored the paneling, so that looks a little bit different. I've also included grommets on this one. So this one can be used as a crossbody handbag as well, or a little clutch handbag. And this one is a wallet clutch without any grommet holes. So without the grommet holes, make it really easy for a beginner. Talking about that, this is a perfect beginner make. There is so many new little skills, but they're not tricky. So this is a great beginner project if you would like to start trying something a little bit trickier. Truth be told, I have kind of shied away from wallets. I've not done a lot of wallets myself, mainly because wallets intimidate me. Wallets are scary, you guys. So this is actually one of the first real wallets that I have made. So I've made the Sewfisticated card holder, which is just like a little zipper pouch that has card slots. But I've never made a real wallet. So this is actually the first wallet I've made, and I am obsessed. I'm addicted. They're so cute and so much fun. So let's talk about the styles, because I said there's 4 different styles. So what are they? So this is, like I said, style 2. So style 2 and style 1, style 2 has the panel. Style 1 doesn't. So style 1, it is all the one panel, so you don't have that detailing if you don't want it. And then you have a back slip pocket. Style 3 and 4, you can either do the detailing pocket or without the detailing, and it doesn't have the slip pocket, okay? So that's the difference between the 4 styles. Now, when we go into the wallet, you have your clear vinyl here so that you can have photos or ID cards, anything like that in it. You have a slip pocket underneath here, a slip pocket in here, 12 card slots, so you've got 6 card slots here, as well as 6 card slots here, and then a zipper pocket as well. Now, size-wise, I'm trying to find my phone. Here it is. It is actually big enough to use as a handbag. That's why I like putting grommets in them. So I can put my phone in it, all my cards, wallet, everything, close it up, and it's actually a perfect clutch handbag that I can bring around, and that could be all I need for a night out, because that happens very often. I always go out on night outs. But that's why I absolutely love it. It's so functional. I gifted one to I think it was her 9th birthday, so a 9-year-old little girl. And what I did was I only kept 6 card slots, and then I changed this to just a plain patterned fabric. So that's an option too. So there is customizable options further, but this in itself, it's such a functional, beautiful bag. The sew comes together beautifully, which I probably don't need to tell you guys with any of the Sewfisticated craft patterns. They always come together so beautifully. It's such an easy and fun sew. It's actually quite a relatively quick sew too. Now, one thing I want to point our attention to, because some of you might say, I've seen something similar to that before. Well, funny you should say that. Sewfisticated Craft Designs also has another pattern called the peony. So if you have the peony, this is one of my peony makes, just to give you an idea, this is the size difference, okay? So the peony is a handbag size, but the Ellie is a wallet size, okay? So there is quite a big size difference there. So if you're not looking for a wallet and you want a bigger clutch, the peony from Sewfisticated Craft Designs might be your option. But if you want something a little bit smaller, a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more dainty, I love this as an evening purse, as a wallet. It's absolutely gorgeous. So anyway, I've talked a lot as always, so let's stop looking at my face and let's get on to sewing this together. I can't wait, you guys. Let's have some fun sewing. Okay, let's have a little look on the fabrics and materials that we'll be using today. So like I said before, I'm doing style 2 of this, okay? So your exterior cut pieces may be different to me compared to what style you are doing. So I am doing a mainly faux leather vinyl exterior. So this is a buttery smooth faux leather from Inklings and the Kraken here in Australia, which is also now my company. This is a waterproof canvas with WPC backing. That's from Sewfisticated Supplies. So I'll be using these two as the front exterior pieces. And then I'm complementing it with I guess this is like a dark green faux leather vinyl as well. Moving on to the inside, I've got a few more colors here to play with. One, because I love color. Two, because I think it makes it easier for you guys to follow on the tutorial. So hopefully this helps. So I am using a mixture of Vibrant Vu and Sewfisticated Twill from Sewfisticated Supplies. So this is an eggplant Vibrant Vu. These are peacock in Vibrant Vu. This is violet in Vibrant Vu. I've also got a twill. This is Sewfisticated Twill in eggplant. Again, Vibrant Vu in plum. And also for the card slots, I am doing Sewfisticated Twill, and this is in the color peacock again. So what I love about these fabrics is that they're lightweight, but they also have a little bit of structure, good bit of drape, exactly what you need for bag making. There's no fray or very little fray unless you cut right into the sides too much or the selvage. They're waterproof and they're just lots of beautiful colors so you can mix and match. So it's super fun and easy to work with. Sewfisticated Twill is my preferred fabric when it comes to making card slots. Jassy, the owner of Sewfisticated Supplies, will tell you hers was Vibrant Vu. It is now, I think she said, one of her new linings. I can't remember, sorry, but have a play and you'll find your own favorite. Mine is just Twill, hands down. No one can convince me otherwise. We also need a little bit of clear vinyl. So I am using a clear jelly vinyl. You can use jelly, you can use PVC, you can use printed clear fabric, clear vinyl. You can use even a stiff mesh. So the choice is up to you. The reason I am using the jelly is because this is some scraps that I found because the pieces are super small. Okay, we also need a little bit of stabilizer. I am working with a vinyl exterior. So with the vinyl exterior, I've found I don't need too heavy of a stabilizer. So I am just using, this is the non-adhesive Sewfisticated Light or Sewfisticated Light. So if you are doing a waterproof canvas or a canvas fabric for exterior, maybe use something a little bit thicker, a little bit denser. But with a vinyl exterior, I found the Sewfisticated Light is more than enough for me. Moving on to hardware, this is super hardware light. So we've got a zipper and a zipper pull, one set of magnetic snaps, and then this part is optional, is grommets. Okay, so grommets is optional if you wanted to allow for using this as a handbag or like a clutch with this, like a wrist strap, I guess. So this is completely optional. So if you don't have the ability to do grommets, you don't want it, it's not needed if you just want this as a long wallet. I will be doing the grommets just so I can show you the whole process. Okay, so that's all of the fabrics and hardware. So let's keep moving on. Okay, let's have a little talk about some notions that you will find helpful in this pattern. So first of all, a fabric safe pen, or if you don't have any fabric safe pens, I'm just using a normal pen. A lighter of some sort. I like to use a pokey stick, so technical name is stiletto. It helps me hold fabrics down, especially when I'm doing like card slots and things like that. I find it super useful. A seam ripper. I believe in the seam ripper curse, but also I do like using my seam ripper for installing the magnetic snaps. If you are doing grommets, a way to install the grommets and to cut the grommet hole. Throwing things around. If you have them available, pinking shears. If you do not, we can just use normal scissors as well. That's fine. A hump jumper. There is quite a few different levels on this make. So having a hump jumper is really helpful. If you do not have a hump jumper, my friend Jen from Jen's Homemadeology, she swears by folding fabric and using fabric to help level your sewing foot. I do also have another video on how to use a hump jumper if you are unsure about why you need this little gadget in your life. Double-sided tape. So I have two types of double-sided tape. I think for this one, I mainly only use this one, which is a 1/8 inch. So the reason why I have two, this is a 1/8 inch wide one. This one is a 1/4 inch wide one. My 1/8 is a more expensive double-sided tape that I get imported in from the US, and it doesn't gummy up my needles. Therefore, it is my preferred one. But I like to use this one if I'm not doing stuff that's within the seam allowance because it's cheaper and I buy it from my local dollar shop. Okay. Painter's tape. I have a little trick with painter's tape on this one. If you've watched any of my other videos, you may know that I already have a weird obsession with painter's tape anyway. So yes, we do use painter's tape in my version of this bag anyway. And clips. Make sure you have clips ready and on standby because we will be using those. Okay, let's get sewing. Okay, so first of all, we are working on our ID pocket. So we're going to go ahead and grab our ID pocket piece first. Now on the right side, from the bottom up, we're going to put two measurements. So the measurements are in, I don't know how we can see these, there we go. The measurements are in the pattern instructions as a number. It's also on the pattern piece. So you can either draw it off the pattern piece or you can draw it as a measuring. So I measure, so if you ever wonder why my pieces don't look exactly like the pattern piece, because I use the cut list, okay? But we are measuring from the bottom up. If you are measuring, if you're copying from the pattern piece, just copy it across, and you are copying it onto the right side of the fabric. Like I said, I don't have any fabric safe pens, so I have just used a normal pen, and I've just done it really small, so it's about 1/8 of an inch in, so that it's well within this seam allowance, so you won't see it anyway. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to turn the fabric wrong side up. So this is the wrong side. This is still the bottom. This is the top. I know because that's where I've marked my placements. At the top of the fabric, I'm going to bring across my pattern piece, okay? I feel weird bringing a pattern piece across. And what we're going to do is we are going to draw these boxes down. We're going to line up your pattern to the pattern piece. As you can see, like I said before, my pattern piece and my fabric do not line up because I use the cut list. So I didn't actually fully make up my pattern piece. So your pattern piece will go the whole length of your fabric, okay? And then we are just drawing these boxes. So we're tracing these boxes on just like that. Okay, after we've traced them, what we're going to do is we're going to take this fabric, the pattern piece off, and we're going to flip it upside down. So what this will realistically do is you're making sure you're getting the big and small squares on all of them, okay? So we're doing the same thing, so we're just tracing that across. Okie dokie. Now that we've drawn all the boxes, we can get rid of the pattern piece, and you should be left with 4 rectangles with 4 bigger rectangles with 4 little rectangles in it, just like this. I'll bring that up. That should be pretty clear. Yeah. Okay. And next what we're going to do is we're going to cut the small rectangles out. So Jassy has a suggestion here to use a craft knife if you'd like, or rotary cutters. I tried both. So I made a few Testamakes before I did this one for the tutorial, and I tried both. And to be honest, neither worked for me personally. So what I found easiest is getting your seam ripper, ripping a little hole, just like you do when you make markings for magnetic snaps and that, and then just using thread scissors and cutting out that little rectangle. I don't know how much Jassy will appreciate me saying this, but this little rectangle doesn't have to be perfect, okay? So don't stress if, like me, you aren't the best at cutting straight lines. I joke about missing that day in kindergarten where they taught us how to use scissors, but truth be told, I probably did. Oh, and then of course we're going to do it with all 4 of these, okay? So I'm just continuing on and doing the other 3 now as well. Okie dokie. Now that we've cut the 4 little rectangles out, what we're going to do is we're going to grab some double-sided tape and we're going to put a little bit of double-sided tape all around the exterior of the larger rectangle. Okie dokie. After we've got all the double-sided tape down, what we're going to do next is we are going to cut, kind of like how you do zipper boxes actually. We're just going to cut from the small corner up to the corner where the line is drawn, but being very careful not to cut too far. So you literally just want to snip right into that corner right there. And we're doing that on all the boxes, on all 4 corners. So just cutting straight line from the little rectangles from the corner to the big rectangle corner. Okie dokie. Now that we've cut it all, what we're going to do is we're going to stick it down. So all we're doing is we are folding this to the big rectangle line, just like that, and we're going to stick it down to that double-sided tape. So just get rid of all of that and stick it down. There you go, and we're going to do that with the other 3 rectangles too. Okay, so now that that's all taped together, we're going to bring in our clear vinyl or stiff mesh or whatever you're using. You can put some more double-sided tape on. I don't, as you noticed, I don't know how well you noticed, my double-sided tape's kind of all over the place. So there is excess there to hold onto it. So, and then we're just going to stick it down to the right one. If you want to center it, do center it. One thing I will say to be wary of, and this is because this happened to me the first time, if it's too close to the middle, you will end up, when you're doing the card slots, it might be a little bit harder because you might end up having to cut through clear vinyl with a seam ripper if you use the seam ripper method, so, which is not fun. Okay, and then once we get those clear vinyl pieces down, we're just going to fold the top down, matching the rectangles together, okay? So I'm using, like I said before, Vibrant Foo from Sewfisticated Craft Supplies, so it does like to hold its shape quite well. So like you just saw, just after I fold it, it kind of holds its shape really well. But if not, just quickly grab a couple of clips and just clip it together like I said. So right now we have the wrong sides are folded towards each other. So this is the right side. And then you've got your clear vinyl and this is the wrong side down here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to do a liner top stitch right there along that folded edge. And then we're also going to top stitch around the 2 rectangles, okay? Okay, so let's head over to the sewing machine and let's get that top stitched and then we'll keep moving on. Okie dokie, so we're over at the sewing machine. So like I said before, we're going to do the top stitch and then we're going to baste around the edges of the window. So I like to do the top stitch first. So we're top stitching, so it is just with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then after we've done the top stitch, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to do the top stitch all around the ID window, okay? So again, it is with a 1/8 seam allowance. I actually like to start it just let me show you guys this bit. It's probably me being pedantic. So instead of starting like a little bit up here, I like to start literally parallel to the window and start here 1/8 out. That way when I come back around, I will come back around and turn this way and finish instead of just finishing it like that, because I think to me, it makes it easier to finish it nicely. Okay, so a 1/8 again, all the way around the thing. Now, one thing to watch out for if you are quite new to bag making or using double-sided tape is watch how your needle is behaving. If, like I said before, I have double-sided tape that my machine likes, some that my machine doesn't. If your machine is doing funny things like threads getting caught or, oh, went the wrong way. Mainly thread being caught, to be honest, for me. It is potentially that your, sorry, English Sam. It is potentially possible that your needle is getting sticky from the double-sided tape. So just be wary of that. And you might either need to use a different double-sided tape or a different needle. Sorry, you guys just saw that I just had a bit of a boo-boo there. So all I'm doing is pulling it out. I left long thread tails so that I can fix it up afterwards. And then I'm just going to come back in on that hole as if nothing happened and keep sewing. And then I'll fix it all up in a momento. Okay, I'm just going to do the other window first before I come in and tie up all of my loose threads. So let's quickly get this other side done up too with a 1/8 seam allowance. Okie dokie, pull that through. Make a little bit of space here. Ooh, that was loud. So this is what I'm left with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my threads through onto the wrong side so that, I'm just trying to think. Yep, so I'm pulling my threads through to the, so this is the side that I sewed on. So I'm going the opposite side and I'm just pulling my threads through on this side. So when you pull on one of the threads, you'll see a little loop comes up if you've never done this before. And then you pull that little loop through, and what that will do is they'll pull the thread through from one side to the other side, and then you can tie it off. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just pulling these loose ends through, because that what that will do is, this is on the wrong side. On the right side now you have a perfect rectangle, no loose threads, and all of the thread tails have now come to this side, and we'll tie it off and trim it so that no one will even see any thread tails. And I'm doing that with all of my thread ends for that window, bearing in mind that I have more than you should. So normally you just have, you know, where the starting and ending point is. I have more because I made a mistake and started on a different spot on another segment, if that makes sense. There we go. Sorry if we see my head. I'm just trying to see a bit better over here. Okie dokie, so that's all tied up and all done. So let's turn back around. So this is the side that we were sewing on before. So this is right side up, this is wrong side up. What we're going to do now is we're going to fold the fabric. So this is the wrong side of the bottom here, remember? And then if we flop it around, on the right side, we had marks that we made before. So we're going to bring the folded edge up to meet that first lower mark that we made before. And I'm just going to hand press that down on that bottom seam there. And then I'm just going to clip that in place to where that marking is. Just like that. And then what we're going to do is we are going to top stitch along the center here, up and then across by about 1/8 and come back down. Now, if you would like to, you can also quickly measure here to make sure that this measurement is correct. That measurement is in the instructions, but if you have followed everything correctly, it should be right, okay? And we're only stitching up to the folded edge when we do that quarter. So I'm just folding this in half so that I can find the center, and I just like to make a little notch with my scissors. go. So let's bring that sewing machine back in. Okie dokie. So what we're going to do is we're coming over. We're going to top stitch from the raw edge along the center, slightly across from the center, all the way down in a straight line till you reach the folded edge. I'm going to go across by 1/8 and go all the way back down. Now, if you would like, if you're not confident with your stitch lines, or you are still quite new at this, you can hand draw your lines on. I don't bother because my machine, she's a beautiful straight stitch machine and rarely lets me down in terms of getting beautiful straight stitching lines. So I am just going to sew. I like to just reverse stitch right down the bottom there. That just kind of locks off all of my stitches together. There we go. So this is now what we are working with. Okay, before we quickly move on, I like to just quickly grab a card, double check that this is pretty centered and it's pretty good, which it is, before I keep moving on. And then what we're going to do next, so this is what we're up to, we just done those 2 lines, is we're now going to fold on that second line, wrong sides together. So just fold this backwards, just like that, and finger press, go, and you'll end up with this. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to top stitch along that line, and then we're going to baste around the rest of that perimeter. So let's bring this back in. Okay, and so first the top stitch. So this is with a 1/8 seam allowance. And then we're going to continue on and baste around the rest of it. There we go. So that's now all done. There is a measurement in the instructions for you to double check the height of it. So you can go on and double check that. But otherwise, that is the ID slot done. So let's head back over to the overhead and keep moving on. Okie dokie. Moving on, let's head to our card slot pieces. So sorry, these are a little bit long, so they kind of just cut off on the bottom. So what we're going to do, we've got 2 pieces. I'll put one aside for now. What we're going to do is we're going to put our card slot markings across, okay? So I don't know how well you can see them, but I've kind of drawn them on. They're just this little line on either side of the fabric. So there's measurements on the pattern piece that you can just measure across, or you can copy them across from the pattern piece. Now, one thing that I love to do with card slots that I find help me do these a lot more is every one of your fold lines, you're going to do a little notch cut on, okay? So if you're not sure which ones are your fold lines, oh, one other little quick thing I like to do. So I draw all my markings on the right side of the fabric. So this is the right side, okay? This is the wrong side. So on the right side is the side that I draw my markings. On the wrong side, I actually write top on there as well, because sometimes it might be a bit of time between when you cut these out and when you actually sew. Okay, so we're going to cut notches on all of the fold sections. So that's the bottommost one. And then when there's 2 lines close to each other, it's the top one. And I'll do that on both sides. And it's just a tiny little notch, okay? So all I'm doing is I'm just cutting about 1/8 in, sometimes even less than that. It doesn't need to be any maths involved. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fold. I like to fold from the bottom. I think in Jassie's instructions, she likes to fold from the top. I guess there's no right or wrong way of doing it, but when you've got those notches cut, it makes folding that line super easy. And on her instructions, she's got whether you fold it wrong side together or right side together. So the first one is wrong sides together, and then you fold it up, right sides together to meet your next marking. I like to quickly grab some clips and clip it at that marking. And then finger press. I like to do a lot of finger pressing. You'll find And it's probably to do with the fact that this is sophisticated twill that I'm working with, and sophisticated twill, it folds really well. It likes to do what you're asking of it. So right then, you just saw me, I'm just folding right where that cut is, and then as I fold it, I'm just moving that clip to also include that layer so that I can then finger press. That's wrong side together and then right side together. So it's just, and then you're meeting up to the next notch again. And then as I meet up to the next notch, I also reclip to include that bottom layer and then finger press. I do also have another video as well on how to do card slots and tips and hints on it. So do have a look if you struggle with card slots. The biggest thing with card slots is, to me, it's your material choices. Okay, I tried for a while to use cotton woven for card slots. I personally do not like using cotton woven for card slots. I know cotton woven's a lot cheaper. I just struggle. I struggle with it, and they never come out looking nice. So that's the biggest reason why I don't. So my biggest tip is always use the right fabrics. It doesn't have to be sophisticated twill. It doesn't have to be from Sewfisticated Supplies, but this is what I've found that works for me the most. Go. And then finger press, there we go. And then we also have a second piece as well. So I'm just going to quickly fold the second piece. Now, one thing Jassy has in here is to double check that your cards match, that these folds are equal. Looking at it, I can tell it's equal. I trust my own cutting, so I know it's fine. I'm just going to quickly do the second piece as well now while I'm here. Oh, actually, while I'm doing this, I'll quickly talk to you guys through this. One of the makes that I did as a tester make, I can't show you guys in this video because I've already gifted away as a gift. I made it for a little girl for a birthday present. And so obviously a little girl wouldn't need, maybe it's not obvious, but she doesn't need so many card slots. So for her one, I actually only did 1 lot of card slots. And the second piece, I just did a patterned fabric on the inside, and so that it just, so it just only had 1 batch of 6 card slots, and that was it. Okay, so that is something you are able to do if you wanted to do that. All you have to do is cut to the width of the card slots, and then the height is, it's in the instructions. Step 8, page 10, step 8 of the instructions tells you the height of the finished card slot. So I've just cut it as per the finished card slot's height, and then I've made it follow the rest of the instructions as if it was a card slot, but obviously just didn't fold it as a card slot and do any of the sewing as a card slot, if that makes sense. Okie dokie. So that's all folded and it's beautiful. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head over to the sewing machine, and we are going to top stitch each of these 3 folds, but making sure you're moving them out of the way as you sew. So you don't want to sew it down to the bottom. Oh, sorry, you don't want to sew it down to the bottom. Okay, so you're just sewing each pocket on its own. So I just like to move it out of the way. Sew that, move that out of the way, sew that, move that out of the way, sew that. That's kind of what we're doing here, okay? And we're going to do that with both pieces. After we've sewn, we've top stitched those 3, we're going to baste it together so that all of these hold in place. After you've baste stitched it, again, grab your cards, double check that they fit so that you know that your measurements, or not your measurements, but you haven't shifted while you were sewing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew a line all the way up the middle, back across, and all the way back down to turn these from 3 slots into 6 card slots. Okay, but I'll talk you through it as we sew over at the sewing machine. So follow me over. Okie dokie. So let's get on to this card slot. So like I said, I like to fold it out of the way. Make sure you're top stitching on the right side. Yep, so I like to sew it on this side. So I just flip this back out of the way. Make sure you're completely out of the way before we top stitch each of these layers. And we are top stitching, so it is with a 1/8 seam allowance. Okay, now one thing I like to do, because as you can see, I've only got one clip at the bottom here. So after I do each section, I put a clip, clipping that top that I've just done onto that back panel, just like that. And then what I'll be able to do then is move that all behind again together and held in one place as I do this next level. Then again, move that clip down. And then the last level. Go, and then fold that up. So after we've top stitched each of those levels, what we're now going to do is we are going to sew along these two edges, baste it all to make sure that they all hold in place. So what I like to do just before I go again is just another nice little finger press. Again, like I've said before, I'm working with sophisticated twills. So this fabric likes to hold its shape and its folds wherever you tell it to hold. So it does make it a lot easier. If you are working with a fabric that doesn't behave as well, you can use an iron to give it a quick little press. But I find whenever I'm dealing with a fabric that requires ironing, I like to let it sit so that it can cool down and hold its shape before you sew on it again. Okay, so don't sew on it straight away while it's still warm. Okay, and then after I've basted that, that's when I cut all of my long thread tails out. So by doing that, I found that helps lock off these thread tails, these top stitch thread tails, so that they don't move around as much. Now, on this side, obviously, normally I'd come this way. I find I like to sew my card slots from the bottom up, so I'm actually going to do it from the wrong side. Because it's just a basting stitch, it doesn't really matter, but I just find this way everything kind of holds its place a little bit better for me. And I do use a pokey stick to make sure I hold each of these levels exactly where they're supposed to be. Is levels the right word? I don't know. That's what I'm calling it. Okay. And then again, just chopping off all of those tail ends. Or I flip it right side out. Okay, here we go. So that looks beautiful. It all looks level and exactly right to me by my eyes. But if you want to double check, a good way to double check is just kind of fold it in half. And then you can see if they all match up level to level, which they do on this perfectly. Now, while I've also got this folded in half, I'm just going to quickly mark the center on the bottom of my card slots. Because now what we're going to do is similar to what we did with the ID pockets. We're going to sew from the bottom up all the way to the top, fold across and come back down with a 1/8 between the two lines. So we want to start slightly across from the 1/8 from the center on the bottom. Again, if you want to, you can draw sew lines. Again, I don't do it because I am overconfident. No. Okay, now this is your last chance to double check all of your spacing, that your spacing is right. So grab a card again, just quickly double check it. So the main thing you're checking for is that everything obviously fits, they're very level, and that you've still got space because this is still going to get sewn on, yeah? Okie doke. So I'm going to quickly do that with the second card slot piece as well. Exactly what I did with that first one. I won't talk through it so that I can go much quicker. And we will keep going. Okie dokie. So that's the two pieces all done. So I'm just going to move this sewing machine out of the way because this next part is pretty easy. Okay. Okay. So now that we have our two pieces of card slots all done, what we're going to do is we are going to match them right sides together, bottom to bottom. Okay, so this is the way the cards go in on both. This is the top, this is the bottom. We're matching them bottoms together, right sides together. Okay, so like I said before, if you only wanted 6 card slots, you didn't want the 12. So one of the other pieces that I made, I cut a piece exactly the size of these completed card slots. And then I just did exactly that. The bottom of the pattern against the bottom of the card slots, right sides together. Okay. So that's just an option if you didn't want so many card slots and you wanted a slightly quicker make. Okie dokie. So we are right sides together. Okay, right sides together, bottom to bottom, and we're just going to sew along that bottom edge with a 3/8 seam allowance. Okay, so let's bring this back over here. There we go. So that's 3/8, and let's pull this over. Okay, moving this out of the way again. Let's do this here. Okay, so we've just sewn that bottom together with a 3/8 seam allowance. So what we're going to do now is we're going to trim these 2 corners just to help reduce bulk. Okay. Now, one thing I like to do at this point, it's not in the instructions and you don't have to, I just find it gives me a better finish, is open these seam allowance up onto its own side. So one side on this way, the other side on this way, because later on we are going to top stitch this join, but not right now. Okay. So that's why I just like to open it up now and give it a nice flatten, help it hold its shape. If you really wanted to, because you are pedantic like me, you can even just put a little clip on there to help it hold its shape. Give it a little iron if you want. Let it sit overnight under a heat press. Well, without the heat on, please. Please do not have the heat press on overnight. Okay, so this is what we're working with, right? So if you open it up, it looks like this. I've got clips in the middle there just to help hold that seam allowance, because I want that seam to kind of hold to its own side right now, but it's not important. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to grab our slip pocket lining piece D1. There we go. And we're going to open this up. And we're going to match it right sides together to one of the card slot sides, okay? So it's up to you which side you match it. If your card slots are exactly the same like mine are, then it really doesn't matter. Let me quickly grab a finished one to show you guys how it looks. Okay, oh, sorry. So if you have different fabrics for your card slots, or if one of these is card slots and the other one is a plain fabric, just to give you an idea what we're doing. So this slip pocket piece, whichever side you're attaching this to, that is going to be this one here, okay? So the pockets that are here closest to the ID spot, okay? So with the one that I said before that I made for a little girl with only 6 card slots, I chose to have this as the card slots. So I still had the slip pocket on the card slot side, and then the fabric side was just over on the exterior bit, okay? So just to give you guys an idea if you were playing around with different colors and stuff like that. So the slip pocket right sides together with the card slots, one of the card slots. If the card slots are exactly the same, it doesn't matter which side. And we're just matching it like that, right sides together. And then we are going to sew it together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Whew. So if you have a seam guide like me and you are bad with maths like me, that is a number 4. Yep, so 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly trim off these seam allowances. Go, that just helps to reduce bulk at the final construction. And then we're going to open it up so that it is wrong sides together. I like to give everything a good press. That's one thing, if you've never watched my videos before, I am a strong believer in spending time pressing out and holding out your seams before you top stitch. I think that's that's the difference between a really clean, professional finished make and one that isn't, I think, personally, in my opinion. Okay, there we go. And then what we're gonna do is we are going to top stitch this edge as well as baste it. So right now you can baste it right from the bottom if you would like. That sometimes can help hold this in, but it doesn't that well because obviously your seam is somewhat folded. So there's a couple ways you can do it. If you are super confident, you can just do it all in one go. So baste, top stitch, and then come back across and baste like I am doing. Or you can actually, if you're relatively new, to get a better, cleaner finish, you can actually top stitch that top line first. And then after you do that, come back and baste that. And the reason being is your basting stitch isn't important. It's just a basting stitch. So top stitch again is 1/8 seam allowance, but your top stitch is the one that people will see with your finished make. Okay, so your top stitch is always the one that needs to be perfect. So if you are not confident that your fabric won't move, or whatever the reason be that you choose that you might want to do your top stitch first and base stitch, that is a way to help get a cleaner finish. Okay, so there we go, and that's where I'm stopping. So just before I get to the join, there we go. Okay, now, ooh, can I keep doing this here? I think I can. Okay, let me move the sewing machine again and let's keep going. Okay, so this is what we are up to. I'm going to take these clips away now. Like I said, this was just to help me get that seam nice and open and staying open. Again, it doesn't have to be set open. It's just how I like to get a nice clean finish at the end. If you don't do that, it's really not the end of the world. Now, Jessie has a measurement here again. So if you wanted to measure it, you can measure this here. I don't bother because I trust my seam allowances. I know I've cut the fabric right. So I'm just going to keep moving on and keep going. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab our 2 side panel lining pieces. So first what we're going to do is we are going to fold on one of the short edges 3/8 of an inch down wrong sides together. Okay, so this is the right side, this is the wrong side, and I'm folding it down like that. It's about 3/8 of an inch. It should be 3/8 of an inch. As you can see, I am eyeballing it. And then we're going to match the folded side to the side where you've also got your top stitching and your folded edge. Right sides together. And then open. Make sure your seam is still flat. And line that up and clip it together. If your side lining seam is longer than your card slots, that is fine. You can trim it afterwards. It could be because if you saw the measurement in Jessie's, that measurement can be slightly, it could be a little bit longer, it could be a little bit shorter, or if you just guesstimated that 3/8 like I do, that also makes a difference obviously in it. And then we're doing the same on the other side as well. So right side, wrong side. Oh, this is the wrong side. This is the right side, yeah. Okie dokie. Now that that's all clipped on, we're going to go back over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew both of these edges on, or these sides on, with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're then going to trim off those, the excess, as well as your seam allowance corners. But let's just do it. Why am I talking so much? Okie dokie. So 3/8 seam allowance. No, sorry, 1/4 inch seam allowance. 1/4 inch seam allowance. And the other side. Okie dokie. So that's all sewn together. Like I said, first I'm just going to trim off these excesses. And then we're going to trim off that seam allowance just right there, making sure not to cut your threads as you do that. Oh, it's easier to cut on this side so you can see better. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put this aside. Now, here's another little tip before you put it aside, because this is something that I like to do in case you guys haven't realized already that I'm a bit of a stickler pedantic about this, is I'm going to open up that seam allowance and I'm just going to seam press it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put it under my iron press to give it some pressure while I work on other things. Now, if you do not have an iron press, just anything heavy, just things like pins, another bag, a book, anything like that, just to help open that seam before we get to the part where we work on the next bit. Okay, so I'm going to go put this under my heat press with the heat off, just to allow pressure and do that. And then we'll keep moving on to the zipper pocket, I think is next. Okay, let's keep going. Okie dokie, so we're moving on to the side gusset. So we should have 4 pieces of these, okay? So we're doing exactly the same on all 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab one of our pieces. This is the right side, that's the wrong side. So we're going to fold them right sides together, short edges to meet, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along that short edge and one of the long edges at a 1/4 inch. It doesn't matter which side long edge, but of course I'm doing this one because it just keeps going. Okay, so once we've done that, we're going to trim off the corners. We're going to turn it right side out and we're going to top stitch the top and bottom. But we're doing that with all 4 pieces, okay? So let's head over to the sewing machine and we will get these 4 pieces sewn up. Okie dokie, so let's get these side gussets going. So like I said, we are doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the short edge as well as one of the long edges, okay? So, and we're doing that with all 4 pieces. Okay, now that we've sewn, oops, sorry, knocked you guys. Now that I've sewn it all together, we're just going to trim off some corners. So we're just going to trim off that corner there on there. Making sure don't cut your stitches, okay? So make sure you do not cut your stitches, just trim off those corners. And then we are going to open it, or birth it, turn it right sides out. If you have anything near you, use something to poke out those corners, just to help get a beautiful little rectangle finish. As you can see, I literally use anything I can find that is a dull, ideally rounded corner. And then I'm just going to press that open and flat. And then we're going to do that with all 4 of the pieces. So this piece that I've done, you saw me seam press it. I'm just going to put it over here and I'm just going to put my clips on top of it. Like I said, I like to, whenever I can and put pressure on things before I top stitch, I like to do that. So that's all I'm doing there. Okay, and we're doing the same on the other 3 pieces. Okie dokie. So now that we have pressed that all open and we're all happy, what we're going to do now is top stitch. So we are top stitching along the 2 short edges. So just along here and along here. And we're going to do that again with all 4 pieces. Okay, so we're top stitching. It's just with a 1/8 seam allowance. So one side and then the other side. Just along both those short edges. There we go. And then we're doing that with all 4 pieces. So the other 3 pieces as well. So I'll quickly get these 3 done. There we go. So that's all 4 pieces all done. Just cut these all apart. There we go. And we're just going to put these aside and keep moving on. Okie dokie. So let's move on to the zipper pocket. We're going to start working on the zipper first. If you haven't already, make sure you singe your zipper tape. It's just good housekeeping. If you can find a lighter, that works. and insert your zipper pull if you haven't done it already. Okay, then we're going to grab our zipper tab. I'm going to find the center. So this is wrong sides together. Just finding that center there. And then we're going to fold both of the short edges in to meet that center. And then fold it together again. Go. So you just end up like that, or your raw edges in the inside. And then we're just going to place it onto the zipper tape. So the side where it is closed. Okay, so that's the open side. That's the closed side. And then we are just going to top stitch the zipper on. Okay, so let's quickly head over to the sewing machine and we'll get that zipper tab sewn on. Okie dokie, let's get this zipper tab sewn on. Now, if you've never done a zipper tab before, you may find it helpful to have a hump jumper nearby, because obviously your zipper is quite a big hump jump. So like it's quite a bit bulkier. Here, I don't know how well you can see that. So here, there is now a gap about this deep underneath my sewing foot. And what you'll find is some sewing machines are okay with it. Some do not like it. And what happens when they do not like it is that they will skip a stitch. So my machine is fine with it, but if yours isn't and you skip a stitch, what you need is a hump jumper in there just to get it on. But there we go. So we've done that. Now what we're going to do next is we are going to create a 90-degree angle on the edge here. Okay, so how I like to do it is I fold it down by, I want to say roughly about 1/4 inch. So I just kind of give it a little fold and a press. Now my friend Jen from Jen's Homemadeology, she does have a trick on how you can do it with a lighter where you singe it, and that kind of helps hold everything together, but it's with an electric lighter. I have that, but I'll just show you guys how the easiest way to do it when you don't have any fancy gear is as well. So you've got that fold line there that you've made. Fold that backwards again, open that zipper tape up, fold that back, and then this folded edge, you're bringing it up to the zipper teeth, just like that. And then I'm going to clip it in place. Now, Jassy has a measurement in the pattern, so you can measure it to make sure that that is the right length. But realistically, as long as your zipper teeth ends up at the edge of your zipper tape, it should be right, okay? But do double check it before you base this in place. I'm just, like I've said before, I'm overconfident, so I'm just doing this. Okay, and then like I said, now we're just going to base that in place. So if you have a pokey stick, use a pokey stick. I find it the easiest. Get your needle in, pokey stick at the ready, so pokey stick can hold this, especially that fold to the spot as you baste it. If you do not have a pokey stick, a seam ripper has also worked for me in the past. Just hold it with your seam ripper. It's just to make sure you don't, I guess, sew on your finger. I do also like to backstitch on that bit. I know it's a basting stitch, but to me it kind of holds everything in better, I think. Whether it does or not, I don't know, but it's my feeling. Okay. Same on this side. So this side's a little bit trickier because of course, like you are using your clip that you have to get out to hold it all in place. So like I did before, I'm using my seam ripper or my pokey stick to hold everything in as I get it under the needle. And then I come back out and then use my, so just hold it there. And then I do go back and pull it all back in. There we go. Okie dokie. So you will end up with this, a 90-degree angle on one side and a zipper tab on the other. Quickly measure, make sure that is around the right measurement that Jassy has. If it's a little bit off, I'm not gonna lie, I just leave it, but that's between you and me, okay? Okay, so now do I do it here? Yeah, no, let's go back over to the overhead. Let's do it from the overhead. Okay, let's head back over to the overhead and we'll keep going. Okie dokie, so we've just head back over to the overhead. So we're got our zipper here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold the zipper in half so you can find the center point. I like to mark it on both sides of the zipper just to help make it easier for me, to be honest. So I just get a little pen, just draw a little line. Some of you may notice that I cut notches on fabric, but on the zipper tape I am drawing. The reason being is I know some people say you can singe your zipper tape and whatnot after you cut it, but to be honest, it's still not a great, it can still fray, and the last thing you want is your zipper tape to fray after you finish the project. So that's why I always just draw on zipper tape and I never cut, okay? Okay, and then we're grabbing our zipper fabric and we're also marking the center points along the width of this one. So not the height, the width. Okay, and then we are going to, this is the right side of the fabric. This is the wrong side. We're going to match the zipper to the fabric, right sides together, and then center to center. Just like that, and clip it in place. Now, to make it easier, it is best to do the side where your opening, so your 90-degree angle is on your left first. That's to do with the final top stitch, okay? So that's why we're doing it this way first. And what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew this down with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to open it up and we're going to top stitch it. Then we're going to match the other side over to that center as well. Sew that together with a 1/4 inch. And then also top stitch it. Now, Jassy does have a little tip here for you. If you did want to add a sew-in label, this is a good spot to add it on. She's got the measurements on the instructions on where to add it and how to place it. So if you are doing it, this is a good spot. I am not, but let's keep moving on. So let's head back over to the sewing machine and get that sewn down. Okie dokie, so let's get this zipper sewn on. So we're doing it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So what I like to do is just make sure that that 90 degrees is really right up against here. Now, where you start here, because of the zipper tape, you might need a hump jumper. So just make sure you have it at the ready if you do. Okay. And that's just with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, once we've sewn that on, we're just going to open that up, flatten that seam allowance, and then we are going to top stitch that with a 1/8 seam allowance. Okie dokie. And then we're doing the other side as well. Now, if you'd like to, before you move on with all of that, you can quickly clean up all of your loose threads around here. I have to admit, I'm always really bad at cleaning up loose threads and then at the end try to do it all, and it's, yep, not fun. So do it while you remember. Perfect. Okay, so other side. So what we're going to do now, just move this a little bit, give us a little bit more space, is we're bringing the bottom right sides together to the other center point, matching that up. And we're doing the same thing. So it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance to get that zipper on. And then we're going to open it up and top stitch. Okay, so the open up and top stitch is a little bit trickier. It's probably the trickiest part of this whole make, to be honest, but we got this. I've got you. There we go. And then again, just make sure you get all of these threads trimmed off. It's easier for this particular one to trim it all now instead of afterwards. So that's why we're doing it. That's why I'm doing it all now. Oh, I just lost my pokey stick. There you go. Then now what we're going to do is open that zipper up all the way. Give this seam a nice little flatten. So we're going to top stitch this last bit. Now, one way that I've found works for me is we're just kind of tunneling it. So if you want to do it this way, you can do it, because of which side I've sewn first, the easiest way for me to do it at this point is actually to open it up like this. And this is all I do. So I get it in like this as a tunnel. It looks horribly messy, but I promise you it's good. And because I've given it a little seam press, this is holding beautifully on where I need to do it. And then I just put my needle down and then we top stitch with a 1/8. So the trickiest part is this part right here, because obviously you're kind of going through a tunnel. But once we get through that tunnel and you can straighten it up, it's actually no different than a normal top stitch. Just make sure you bring it flat and level as you come around. That's all you're doing. There we go. Ta-da! And that's now all top stitched. So I can turn it right side up. So we've got a top stitch on both sides, zip that up. And now we're just going to match those raw edges. I like to match the top and then give that a little clip on there. Same over on this side, match this up. Then a little clip. And then we're just going to baste these short edges together with a 1/8 seam allowance, again, basting. I'm using my thread scissors because I dropped my pokey stick just before and I haven't picked it up yet. Okay. Go, and then quickly on the other side too. There we go. And that's our zipper pocket done. So we can go ahead and put that aside. Ta-da! Okay, so this is what we're up to. Let's grab our main lining panel and then we're going to go and grab our card slots as well. What we're going to do is we are going to match these together. So the bottom of the main panel, which is the one without the curve, I'm just going to quickly find a center point. It's not necessary. It's just, I just like to do it. To me, it just helps line everything up a little bit cleaner. And I'm just going to quickly do that on this piece too. So this is obviously the raw edge. Do not do this on the folded and sewn edge. So the raw edge is going to match the center on the bottom piece. So this is, I'm just moving this to make it easier for me, to be honest. So this is the bottom of the lining, the main lining, and the raw edge of the card slots. This is the slip pocket edge. Matching them together, both right sides up. And then you should find that with these pieces, these size pieces, these should fit perfectly. If it doesn't, it's probably either a seam allowance problem or a cutting problem. There we go. And you can see over on here, I did have a small cutting problem. I knew that when I cut it because I was running out of fabric. It's slightly off. It's super obvious on here because obviously I'm using two different colors here, but it's still within my 1/8 basting allowance, so it doesn't matter. Okay. So I'm just going to clip this all in place. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we are going to top stitch and base around these two long rectangles. So the way I like to do it, like I said, because the important step is the top stitch, right? So I like to top stitch there and then down here and then base the raw edges. And then on this side, I'll start from here. So I'll top stitch and baste. Okay. So after we do that at the sewing machine, we're then going to also do a line of top stitches 1 inch away from either side of that center line as a rectangle. Okay, so just a rectangle around here at the bottom. Okay, so that's why I liked to have opened up that seam allowance earlier and just given it a good press, because that just makes it easier to do this whole section. Okay, so let's head over to the sewing machine and let's get that all sewn onto the lining piece. Okie dokie, so let's get this sewn on. So like I said, I like to do it so that I'm doing the top stitching sections first before I do the basting, just so that it looks a little bit prettier. But that is a personal preference, okay? There is no need to do it the way that I do it, as long as you get these two rectangles sewn onto the main lining. So it is a top stitch, so a 1/8 seam allowance and a base stitch. So again, just 1/8 the whole way around the rectangle is probably the best way to say it. Okie dokie. And then the other side's rectangle. And then after we've done those two little rectangles on the side, what we're going to now do is that center bit. Okay, so what I actually like to do is actually start on the actual seam. So put my needle in on the seam. So on my top stitching stitch, it might not be, but I like to say that it is, one rotation is roughly 1/8 of an inch. So I do start from the seam, come 1/8 out, or one stitch out, and then go the whole way along, lining up to that seam so that it's 1/8. I get to the other side, and then that one stitch should bring me back to that center line, and then one more stitch out will bring me up to 1/8 on this side, and then all the way down. Go. And boop, back into that center seam right there. And then with our long thread tails, we're now heading over to the back. Oh, this is a bit hard to see. And like we've done before, we are pulling our thread tails through and tying it off on the back to give us a nice clean finish on the front. Ta-da! Okie dokie. I'm just going to trim this a little bit. Doesn't need to be so long. There we go. So that's all trimmed, and that is your rectangle there as well. We'll head back over to the overhead to do the next part, I think. Yep. Okay. So let's head back over to the overhead. Okie dokie. So we've just sewn that on. So next what we're going to do is we're going to grab our side panels, or side gussets, sorry, I should say. So bring these all back in. And what we're going to do is we're going to mark 4 markings on here, okay? So I've already done it off camera. You can just see them here. So there is a measurement in the pattern instructions, and you're measuring it based off that center seam, okay? So the center seam of the card slots, and then you're measuring up and down on either side, okay? So once you've done that, we're going to match these side gussets together. Now, I don't know if this is in the instructions or if this is something that I just like to do with my little OCD brain, but I like to make sure, so I don't know how well you can see this. See how this one has a joined seam and this one is a folded seam? So I like to make sure the joined seams face each other on here. So this is a joined seam, this is a joined seam. So the joined seams all face each other like that, and matching up against those marks that we just made. So what that just means is when this is all put together like that, you're looking at both of these sides are all the folded edges, and the joined seams are all down the bottom. If you have it the other way around, so the joined seams are at the top and the folded seams are at the bottom, that's fine too. Or if you don't even have them the same way, that's absolutely fine too. Like I said, I am a little bit OCD sometimes with these kind of things, but I feel like if we're going to do something, why not do it really nicely and professionally? Like, that's what sets us apart, right? Being a handmade business. So, okay, join seam at the bottom. Oh, and in case I didn't say it and it's not obvious, it's raw edges against the side, right? Okay, so this is all not raw edges. The raw edges are all along this side. Okay, once we've clipped that all in place, the next thing that we're going to do is base these on. So we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we will base these 4 panels on. Now I'm going to cheat. I'm going to move on and do the next step now as well. Mainly because I don't want to keep having to move the camera. So if you are doing it exactly as per the instruction, you're going to base these 4 on first. And then after you've done that, you're going to grab your ID pocket. You can do it the same way I am too. There's absolutely nothing stopping you. And we are just matching the ID pocket to the top, okay? The raw edge goes against the top. The folded edge is facing inwards. So I'm just going to clip that in place. Obviously your ID slots, they haven't been cornered yet, trimmed yet. So this is a rectangle that's going against a curved corner. That is fine, that is normal. We are going to You can cut that now if you want to before you sew it, or you can cut it after you sew it on, okay? So I like to cut it after I sew it on. So I will be basting it on this way, and then so I can follow that curve, and then I'm going to trim it off afterwards. But if you would rather trim it off now as well, you are more than welcome to, okay? There we go. So that's all down. So now what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the sewing machine. I'm going to baste these 4 side gussets down, as well as based on the ID pocket. Okay, so follow me over to the sewing machine and let's get all of that basted down. Okie dokie. So let's get this basted on. Now, this might seem weird, but because I've got all of these done, all of these clipped on, I'm actually just going to all baste in one go. And I like to baste this on upside down, so the main lining is facing upwards, so I can't actually see. Oh, does that make sense? Yeah, so I can't actually, I'm on the wrong side, so that this is the right side, this is the wrong side, and that's because I can then follow this curve, okay? And so we are just basting, so it is a 1/8 seam allowance, just getting those side gussets on, as well as the ID panel. There we go. So now that that is all basted together, what we're gonna do is go and grab my scissors to cut this off the sewing machine. Sorry. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna head back over to the overhead, and we are going to trim off these 2 ID corners so that it is also rounded. And then we are also going to install the magnetic snap. So follow me back over to the overhead and we will get working on that. Okie dokie, so this is what we are up to. We've basted it all together. I haven't trimmed those corners yet, so I'm just going to quickly do that now for that ID pocket to the lining. So just trim that following that lining curve. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to install the magnetic snaps. If you haven't done it before, I'm going to explain it in excruciating detail. So if you have and you want to skip through this, please do. So these are our magnetic snaps. So this is your female, the one that is indented in, and this is your male, the one that has the pokey bit out. Okay, so we are working with our male at the moment with the lining piece. So we are measuring 1 inch down from the center of the top. So I've already done that. You can just make out a dot right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab our washer and a pen. It doesn't have to be a fabric safe pen because this will be covered by your magnet. I'm lining up, I hope you guys can see this well, but I'm lining up that dot that I marked to the center of my washer circle. And then I'm just going to draw those 2 lines from the washer. So I'm using that washer as a guide. There we go. So that's all I've done. And then we're going to grab our seam ripper and we're going to seam rip along there. Just being careful not to go too far, okay? Now, if you are struggling with this bit, like there is a lot of fabric here, okay? So it could just be that you're in a lot of fabric and we need to put some muscle into it. But it could also be, remember one of the tips that I gave you before is your clear vinyl might be getting in the way. That's what happened to one of my makes. I have not made that mistake again. It was not fun. Okay, and then, oh, before I put this in, if your fabric tends to fray, make sure you put some fray stop or even glue. If you don't have fray stop, I use glue. That's a cheating method. Just to stop the fabric from fraying. This is, like I've said before, Vibrant Voo and Sophisticated Twill, so it's pretty fray proof, so I'm not worried. And then we're just going to put the prong through. Okay, so the prongs are now through. Then we're going to put the washer down and then we're going to flatten it. To me, it doesn't really matter which way you flatten it. I just go whichever my mood feels like. Most of the time it is outwards, okay? Now, after we've done that, I like to grab a little bit of painter's tape and just stick a bit of painter's tape on there. So that's just to stop these prongs rubbing against material on the other side and potentially causing damage. Okay, there we go. So that is your magnetic snap installed there. Now next, what we're going to do is we are going to be drawing a line on the bottom and on the wrong side. Okay, so we are, I don't know how well you can see this line. I've already drawn it on. There we go. So the measurement's in the pattern piece. It's just from this edge up. So I've already drawn it. What we're now going to do is grab some double-sided tape, and then we are going to fold the edge into, so there's my line here. I'm just putting the double-sided tape along the line, just there. So, I'll bring this up again. So there's my line, and I've just put it on that side of the line, okay? And then we're going to bring our raw edge, and we're going to fold it back to meet that line. Actually, do you know what? I've missed a step. I have missed a step. So, yep, I've missed a step. Okay, backtrack. I'm leaving this in so you guys can see that sometimes I make mistakes. You could actually just do it like that. I struggle with double-sided tape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to base that raw edge shut. Okay, I'm going to base that shut, and then after I based it, I'm going to then come back and do the double-sided tape. I'm just going to baste it quickly off camera because you guys don't need to see me basting. It's just a straight stitch along there just to sew this bit closed so it's not open and flopping about. Okay, so give me 2 seconds. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I've basted it together. Sorry, it's completely my fault. It's in the instructions. I've missed it. And do you know what's really embarrassing? That's not the first time I missed it. I missed it the first time I made this bag too. Whoopsies. Okay, so double-sided tape, and then we're folding that raw edge to meet that line, okay? And nice finger press. Let the double-sided tape hold it, do its thing. Now, we're going to move on and do the exterior now. So one thing that I like to do is put some weight again on there. Like, this is a good double-sided tape, don't get me wrong, but to be honest, I still don't trust it. So I'm just going to go put it in my iron press and just press it down, hold it so it really holds its shape and gets everything nice and flat and ready for my final assembly. If you don't have an iron press, like I said before, just use books, whatever you like, just to give it a good squish so it all holds in place. Okay, so let's keep moving on and we'll get on to the external assembly. Okie dokie, so moving on to the exterior, if you are doing either style 2 or style 3, you will have 2 pieces. If you're doing style 3, your other piece is longer than my piece here. If you're doing style 1 or 4, you won't have to do this bit, so please skip ahead or keep watching me, I don't mind. Okay, and what we're going to do first of all is we're going to match these right sides together. Now, you might find, or you might say, Sam, yours is the wrong way round. You are correct. Or are we correct? I don't know. So the main thing that we need to make sure with this exterior piece is however you trace and cut your pattern piece, make sure you do it with both pieces. Let me just quickly show you what I mean. Okay, so these are your pattern pieces, okay? So if you are cutting your pattern pieces on your fabric, if you have your fabric right side out for this piece and you're doing it this way up, make sure that you are also doing your flap exterior piece right side up with your pattern piece facing up, okay? So the worst thing you want to do is to cut this one right side up and this one wrong side up, because then you're going to end up with 2 pieces that don't match, okay? So I've purposely done this the other way around. So I've cut this on the wrong side and had my pattern pieces facing up, but I've done it on both pieces. The reason being is because my other one I made before, I had it this way round, like this. So this time round, I wanted it opposite. It really is, yep, that's my reason. One thing to be wary of as well, on this pattern piece, Jassy has kindly given us a fussy cut placement, okay? So like me, I am using my fussy cut for the smaller piece, for the accent. So I didn't really need to worry about the dash lines. I did still fussy cut it and make sure that I would still get a thistle right here in the corner. I wanted a thistle here. But if you were going to do a patterned piece on this piece, make sure that you watch where these dash lines are for where your fussy cutting is, okay? If you're not fussy cutting and you have no idea what I'm talking about, ignore everything I've just said. Okie doke. So now what we're going to do, after we've talked about all that cutting, we are going to match these pieces right sides together, and we're matching the short end, okay? So your short end should, or actually you're matching the long edges, but on this side, you'll have an overhang on the bottom on the tip, but over here you're matching it up to there. And then we're just going to clip it, and we're going to head over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew these two pieces together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, okay? And then after we've sewn it together with a 1/4 inch, we're going to open it up, open it up so it's right sides out, just like that. And then we're going to top stitch on either side, okay? So follow me over to the sewing machine and let's get that sewn together. Okie dokie, so let's get this sewn together. We're going to sew it together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so it doesn't really matter what way you like to do it. To me, a lot of the time, it kind of just depends on my mood. I'm not going to lie, which side I have up on top, but we are just sewing it together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's the external two pieces now sewn together. So what we're going to do is we are going to trim off the corners. Actually, before we trim off the corners, what I like to do is just open it up. Let me bring this out more so you guys can see this better, actually. We're going to open this out first. Make sure everything lines up. I'm going to try and flatten this seam so that they each go their own direction. And what we're going to do is we are going to grab one of our pattern pieces. Let me quickly grab it, actually. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to grab our pattern piece A. Sorry, ignore this bit here. There was a measurement on it, so I've just covered it up. And what we're going to do is we're going to double check that this lines up and it is all perfect, which it is. Now, if for whatever reason it isn't, bear in mind we haven't top stitched yet, so the top stitch will help also bring the fabric out a little bit. But if it's not, you can either use fabric piece A to trim this to size, or you can actually go back in and recheck it, because it could mean that you've lined up the top wrong. It could mean that you've cut the pieces wrong, but more than likely you've lined that up wrong or your seam allowance is wrong. Okay, so those are your issues. With the first one, I made this one, I lined the piece up wrong, completely my bad. And because I lined the piece up wrong, this piece was out by a fair bit. So this piece was out, I think, about that far. And so I just had to put it down and trim it down using this piece. Okay, so that's your quick fix if you didn't want to find out what you did wrong. But this piece has been checked by all the testers and it definitely fits perfectly. Okay, so once you've checked that it is the right size and it's the right, you can go ahead and trim off some of these corners if you'd like, especially here where it is an excess seam allowance there. And then we're going to bring it back in and we are going to top stitch on either side of that seam. Okay, so that's why I said before we were opening that seam up. So we are going to top stitch on either side. Okie dokie. And again, it is a top stitch, so it is just a 1/8 seam allowance. Okay, and then the other part, so the other side of that seam, we're also 1/8 of an inch. Okay, there we go. So that is if you're doing style 2 or style 3, what you would have done for this step here. If you're doing style 1 or 4, obviously you didn't have to sew this together, but yeah, there we go. So let's head back over to the overhead and we will keep moving on. Okie dokie, so this is what we're up to. If you are doing style, actually any of the styles, 1, 2, 3 or 4, you will have your external piece now pretty much like this. If you are doing style 3 and 4, obviously this is longer. But if you are doing style 1 or 2, this is what you're working with. You've got one piece like this shape. If you would like to install your logo, now is the time to install a logo if you wanted to do an exterior logo. Now the next step is for styles 1 and 2 only. So if you're doing style 3 and 4, you don't have a back slip pocket, so you can skip this step and move on to the next part. But otherwise, this is for style 1 and 2. So we're going to grab our flap exterior as well as our back slip pocket lining piece, okay? We're going to match the lining piece to the flap piece, right sides together along the straight edges. And then we're just going to clip it together. Okay. And then we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay. Now, after we've sewn that together with the 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to open it up and we're going to top stitch it with a 1/8 seam allowance, but I will talk you through it as we go. So follow me over to the sewing machine. Okie dokie, so we're over at the sewing machine. So we're just going to sew that together with the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay. Once that's sewn together, what we're going to do first of all is trim off these corners for the excess seam allowance just to help reduce bulk, making sure obviously not to cut your threads. And then we're going to open it up. We are folding it so that we can top stitch over on the lining side. So all of your seam allowance is on the lining side. And we're going to top stitch that over on the lining side with a 1/8 seam allowance. There we go. I'm trying to think of if we need to move across. No, we don't need to move across. We can do it all here. Okay, so let me move the sewing machine out of the way. Okay, so this is our piece. So next, what we're going to grab is our remaining external piece, which for me is this little guy here. And we're going to match this to the other side of the slip pocket. Okay, right sides together as well. Making sure you're matching it the width to the width and not like what I tried to do. Okay. And then we are going to sew this together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance again. Yep, so we're going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then we're going to open it up and top stitch. So, a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And like we did before, we're just going to trim off those corners just to help reduce bulk. And then we're going to turn it right side out. And then we're going to just flatten that seam. And then we are going to top stitch that one seam with a 1/8 seam allowance. There we go. I might head over to the overhead for the next bit because it's a lining and I'd rather do it over on the overhead. Okay, so we've top stitched it. Let's head back over to the overhead and we will get this all lined up. Okay, so this is what we're up to. We have the exterior front flap, the lining, and the last exterior piece, and it's all attached like this. So this, again, is if you are only doing style 1 and 2. 3 and 4, keep moving on. You're not in part of this. No, sorry, that was mean. Okay, so normally what I would do in this scenario is I would bring my ruler up and I would line my ruler up to the measurement, lining up against the bottom flap. But because I'm filming a tutorial, I cannot bring a ruler into measurement. But if you have a quilting ruler, this is a great time to do it. I don't even pretend this is a ruler. And if you had your ruler, say for example, you can line it up to the base or the measurement, and then you'd be able to then line this up perfectly and it'll be nice and straight. So that's why I like to use a quilting ruler. What I've done instead is I've marked the markings there. So the markings are on your pattern piece A, or also you can just measure it from the base up of your flap, okay? From the base of your flap up, so from the curved corners. Now, I've drawn the 2 markings there. So all we're doing is folding that second piece, folding this inwards and matching it up to that line or to those markings there. And then we're going to clip that in place. Making sure this is level as I clip. And then I'm just going to give that a little press because underneath here, that's the flat, that's the pocket, right? That's the slip pocket. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we are going to actually sew that slip pocket closed. So what I like to do is just move these clips right along to the edge here inside that top stitch. And then you'll be able to flip that over as wide as you can. And I'm giving this a really good press, okay? So you can just go over and sew it without clipping it, but I'm just going to clip that bottom bit there so that it holds its place exactly how it's supposed to fold when it was flat. See how it's flat like that? And then when I open it up, it's holding its shape. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew this with a 5/8 seam allowance, okay? So along the edge here, and then we're just going to go up into that corner there. So that just closes up this section here, okay? So we're just closing up that pocket. And then after we do that, we're also going to baste this closed. We're also going to trim off some of that excess seam allowance because we don't need all of this fabric here and we want to trim it off to make the final assembly easier, okay? So let's follow me back over to the sewing machine. First of all, we're going to sew this with the 5/8. And then we're going to baste that together. So follow me over. Okie dokie, so let's get that pocket sewn up. So I like to start from the bottom of that pocket. So this is what it is. Like I said before, just fold it back slightly. And we're doing a 5/8 seam allowance over on this. 5/8, okay. Hopefully my hand's not in the way. There it is. Okay, and then as I come up to the top here, obviously my clip is in the way, so I'm just moving my clip away slightly, and because I'm sewing that lining piece down, it's going to help hold its shape anyway. And I don't know how far you can see how far I've come. I've come as far as I can up here before I come back out. Okay, so just making sure you don't sew down the exterior fabric, but that's how far I'm going. And then now that that's done, close that back up, put that clip back down. Okay, and then the other side. So like I said, I like to come in from the bottom, but obviously it's a bit harder to do from here. So what I am going to do is move this clip because I've got this clip here. So that's actually still holding its place. And then I'm going to come out to the 5/8 here first. And I'm actually going to come out to the edge first. I know this seems really silly, but it's my easiest way for me to measure the 5/8 difference, like the 5/8 seam allowance on that edge, especially because I'm not used to a 5/8 seam allowance, so I don't know how it looks on my sewing machine. And then the 5/8 all the way down. Okay, now that we've sewn that, we're just going to trim off a lot of that because we don't need such a big seam allowance. So up to you how much you cut, but I'm cutting a fair bit off just like that. And then on the other side as well. So that way, when we do the final construction, these layers definitely will not be part of my seam allowance that I have to worry about. There we go. Okay, now that I've trimmed that off, we're just going to quickly baste this bit here too, just to make sure everything is just holding exactly where it's meant to be and it just doesn't shift at all. You'll see I like to leave long thread tails. It's just what I like to do. I just find it easier. And then that way I can lock it off with my next line of sewing when I sew over that section. There we go. Okay, so that's all basted on. So let's head back over to the overhead and we are going to install the magnetic snap for the external piece. So follow me back over. Okie dokie, so this is what we're working with now. We have our exterior pretty much done. We've basted that on so that that's all held in place. We've trimmed off the side of those slip pockets. So Now we are installing the magnetic snaps. This is for all 4 styles, okay? So whether you are style 1, 2, 3, or 4, you will now have one complete piece where it's ready for your magnetic snap to be installed. Now, this can be a little bit confusing. So there is a measurement on there for where to install the magnetic snap, but the measurement isn't a straightforward 2 inches or whatever it is, okay? Actually, I can probably tell you guys, 2.5 to 2 3/4 Jassie's put in there. The reason for it is for how big or what, is big the right word? Like how tight, I guess, you want your wallet. So I've done all of mine so far with a 2.5 and I really like it. So this is 2.5, okay? So if it is 2 3/4, it would just mean that it closes a little bit lower, okay? So what that does is it makes the bag a little bit smaller. Can you see that? So like that's 2.5, 2 3/4 will come down a little bit more, okay? And so that's the difference. It's how much. So 2.5 and 2 3/4 work, and it just changes the wallet a bit more. So 2 3/4 comes out looking a little bit more like this. 2.5 looks a little bit more like this. So I like the 2.5 because it works well as a wallet as well as a clutch. And that's how I like to use these. So that's what I'm doing, 2.5. Now, if you are using a self-adhesive stabilizer or an adhesive stabilizer, make sure you use that. Now, I've done that with my other makes. I've used Sewfisticated Light, a self-adhesive stick-on, what's it called? Stabilizer. But with this one, I'm going to use a sew-in. So I don't need to attach anything right now, except for a little bit of scrap. So I'm just going to put a little bit of scrap behind where I am installing my magnetic snap, okay? So it's just a little bit of good housekeeping just to help stabilize all of that. Now, like I said, I'm doing mine at 2.5. You can do it up to 2 3/4. You can even be a rebel and do 2 5/8. So right in that middle. So it's up to you. And we're installing it the same way we did the lining one. So, but this time we're using the female, so the one with the indented in. And again, we're grabbing our washer and centering the washer to the mark that we made, and then drawing the lines using the washer as a guide. Then we're using our seam ripper to gently rip it. If you are remembering, I just said, if you have adhesive stabilizer, your stabilizer is now adhered. If you are using a sew-in, have a bit of scrap on the back, okay? Then install your magnetic snap. Flip it over. Oh, wash it down first, wash it down first. See, it doesn't matter how many magnetic snaps you do, you will still make mistakes. Okay. I'm just going to put some painter's tape on it. I probably don't need the painter's tape at this stage because I am going to put a sew-in afterwards, so the sew-in would protect it, but I just like to do it. It's something I've always done, so I just keep doing it. Okay, there we go. So that is the magnetic snap all installed. Okay, now that the magnetic snap is all installed, what we're going to do next is similar to what we did with the lining piece. We're going to draw a line along the bottom, put some double-sided tape, and then stick it down. So I measured wrong, so ignore one of these lines. So you should only have one line. From the measurements that are in the instructions, so from the bottom up, and you're drawing that line, and then we're going to put some double-sided tape right along that line. And then we are going to fold that raw edge in to meet that line. Okay, there we go. And then what we're going to do is we are going to move on to the final assembly. Now, I'm going to go make myself a quick cup of tea. And while I am doing that, I am going to, like I did with the lining, quickly put this under a little bit of weight so that that can really get the fold right and hold. So I'm going to give myself a tea break, give that a good press, and then we'll come back for the final assembly. Okie dokie, we're on to our final assembly. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our external piece and our lining piece, and we're going to put it all together, right sides together. Now, I don't have a stabilizer on this make yet because I am using a sew-in stabilizer. So I'm adding that in at the end. If you are not, make sure your stabilizer is already installed. It should have been installed when you did your, what's that called? Magnetic snap. But otherwise, just make sure it's on. Okay. And we're going to clip these two right sides together and clip it all in place. Right sides together, obviously matching those curves. So I like to do the curve first. If you've marked centers, you can of course do your centers as well. And then we're just going to clip it all into place. Now, you might have noticed that I am doing it lining side up and not exterior side up. The reason being is the lining that I am using is Sewfisticated Twill. So there is not less stretch, it doesn't stretch at all. Whereas the other side, I am using, especially this green faux leather, it's got a tiny bit of stretch to it. So I like to have it face down. So I like to work on the bit that has less stretch because it's just easier to work with, in all honesty. Okie dokie. So we're just clipping it all together. Now, one thing to double check is if they match up. So they should match up perfectly along here when we get to that bit. Yep. If it doesn't, double check your folds here are right, or double check your sewing measurements. Okay. Now, once you've got it all clipped into place, we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew it together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we are going to turn it right side out and keep going. So let's head over to the sewing machine and let's get that sewn together. Oh, sorry, 1/4 inch seam allowance. I said that, but I didn't say how. So the side that has the opening, we're not touching this at all. Leave this alone. So we are 1/4 inch all the way around on the raw edges only. So on the two long edges, the curved edge, and that one. And then we're stopping here. Okay. So follow me over to the sewing machine and let's get that sewn together. Okie dokie, we're over at the sewing machine. So like I said, we're doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the folded edge and leaving this folded edge untouched and all the way around the perimeter, just leaving that folded edge open. If you need a hump jumper to start, do have it at the ready. So I just like to have it at the end there just to help me hold it all in place as I get started. And this is just a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, just being careful and wary, there is a few, there's a bit of like unevenness, bulk changes around. So just be wary of it. So just be wary of where the height differences are, the bulk changes are. If you are skipping stitches, then you need your hump jumper. But more importantly, I like to use this section where I'm doing this now to keep an eye out on where those parts are to see if I need my hump jumper for when we top stitch. Because right now, if I skip a stitch, it's okay. It's whatever. No one really cares. Not no one cares. We can fix it easily. But if I have a skip stitch when I'm top stitching, it's just a little bit more effort. This is a little bit of a tip for you. I don't know how many of you guys are noticing that I'm doing this. So I'm actually holding this up myself because I don't have a flatbed sewing machine. So what that means is my sewing machine is elevated up off the table. So there's a big drop. So my fabric obviously wants to flatten down. So when I'm sewing, I hold this side up with this hand, my left hand. And what that does is it just kind of gives, it keeps your fabric more level so that when it sews, it keeps everything, I guess, more in its place for when it's finished. So that's a little tip for you if you are relatively new to sewing, because obviously this bag is a very beginner friendly bag. So I just want to give you guys those extra tips in case you are a beginner. If you are not and you already know that tip, sorry. There we go. So that's all sewn together. So now what we're going to do is, actually I might take us back over to the overhead. It's easier that way. I can get some of these threads trimmed off. Let's do that. Let's head back over to the overhead and keep moving on. Okie dokie, so we've just sewn that all together. What I'm going to quickly do, like I've said before, I've got a lot of loose threads that I like to keep around. So I'm just giving those a little trim off, making sure they're pulled taut so they're all over on the lining side, and hopefully none are on the exterior side. If it's not, it's fine. I just have to clear it off over on that side. So for me, I just find this easier to manage, clipping it all in one go. Okie doke. So now what we're going to do is we are going to trim. Actually, first what we're going to do is double check that we have no skip stitches, that we're happy with how everything looks. Yep, I'm happy. There's no skip stitches. We all look good. Okay, then next what we're going to do is we're going to, I'll show you on this side. We're going to trim the excess seam allowance along these corners, okay? So if you have a, what are these called? Pinking shears? Pinking shears are a great way to do it. So just give that a little trim off there. If you do not have pinking shears, you can use normal scissors and kind of clip little triangles out, okay? So you don't have to go out and buy pinking shears. It's a great addition to have in your sewing room, but if you don't have it, that's all we have to do. Just cut little triangles, making sure you don't cut your seam, not your seams, your stitches. And we're just doing that around the bend. So what that does is it just gives you a smoother finish when you birth it and turn it all the right way around, just so that it's smoother. Go. And then I'm actually also just going to trim off that corner here as well. Don't touch the threads, of course. Okay. And then I'm going to turn it right side out. Get rid of my mess first and then turn it right side out. Ooh. Now, when you turn it right side out, just be careful that your ID pocket is staying on the lining side. So I just stuck my hand in, and I don't know how well you can see inside there, but I put my hand over so that I would have actually turned my ID pocket through the wrong way. So just be aware which side is your external, which side is your lining as you birth it the right way around. There we go. Okie dokie, there we go. So that's all birthed now. Now, one thing I like to do quickly before I even insert my stabilizer, actually I may as well insert it now, it doesn't really matter. I'll do it afterwards. Okay, one thing I like to do, this isn't in the instructions, again, this is me being a little bit pedantic, is right now I am going to go give this a quick little iron. So everything looks fine. I don't know how well you can see it. It looks fine. It's all good, but there's slight little wrinklings on my card slots from when I birthed it. So I just want to give it a quick little press just to make sure it's all ironed, because this is your last chance to iron it while it's flat. So I like to just give it a quick little press to make sure it's all flat and level and ironed and beautiful. And those are just those tiny little points that really elevates your make, right? Okay, so I'm going to quickly go do that and then come straight back. So I've given it a quick little iron. So all my fabric is now nice and straight and beautiful. There's no crinkles in it anymore. Of course, there's still a little bit of crinkles over here because I can't do anything because of the clear vinyl. If your clear vinyl has crinkling like this, I don't know how well you can see it there. What I am going to do after I insert the stabilizer is I'm going to blast it quickly with a hairdryer to warm the vinyl, and then I am going to put something heavy on it to kind of just sit on top of it. So that's a really good way to get rid of creases, okay? Okay, so stabilizer. If you haven't already, if you're using sew in, shove that in now. Of course, if you are using a self-adhesive or an adhesive one, it's already in there, but otherwise, you can insert it now. And then what we need to do now is top stitch around the perimeter. Okay, so that's our next step. Now, Jassy has here to clip your corners to help squish it all down. Now, this is especially helpful with domestic machines. Sometimes when you think your machine can't handle the bulk, it's true. Don't get me wrong. Like obviously domestic machines sometimes can't handle bulk. A lot of the times it's because your fabric hasn't had time to squish yet. If you actually give it a good squish, a good clamp, sometimes that's enough to help it. So if you have a clamp like Jassy does in her instructions, use a clamp. I don't have a clamp. I don't own a clamp. I currently use my my iron press. So I put it inside my iron press, let it press, ideally overnight. That helps to hold it all in place and give it really that flat finish. I don't have that luxury because I am filming a tutorial, so I am going to keep moving on. But that is a good way to do it, okay? What I am going to quickly do though is I'm going to warm up this vinyl, this clear vinyl, because it is annoying me a little bit. I can see the crinklies. And that's going to help it soften and then flatten. And then I'll have a quick lunch and come back and top stitch. There you go. That way I still get to clamp for a little bit. Okay, so I'll see you guys soon. Sorry, I'm back quickly. Okay, I was just about to meet you guys over there to top stitch. I just had lunch and pressed that a little bit. Now, one thing I forgot, I have a little tip for you guys for this next bit. So in Jassy's instructions, you would have seen she top stitches this section lining side up. I did that with my first make. It's fine, it works, but I know there's a lot of people that like to top stitch this side up. So a little tip that I've found works for me to have exterior side up is get some painter's tape and stick these in. So I just put a little bit of pressure on it and actually pull it down so that it's nice and taut, and just stick it out of the way because we want these side bits folded in for that final top stitch. There we go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to do my final top stitch. So I am going to do it this way around. Okay, so Jassy does do it lining side down. I'm going to do it this way down. And you're going to start roughly at the center here. Okay, so that's another reason why Jassy does it that way up. So I just do this, stick that little that there where it lines up with that line so it comes over here. So I know that's roughly where I want to start. It doesn't have to be precise. So the reason she starts there is because that is obviously the bottom of the bag. So where you start and stop your top stitching is the most likely place for it to look messy, okay? So that's why it's done there. Let me grab my other one quickly. Here it is. This is my other one. So if we start here, it's roughly here. So this was my start stop. So like, as you can see, it's actually pretty clean. It's not too bad at all, but that's where my start stop is. So that's why, yep, we like to do it there. Okay. So follow me over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch the whole perimeter with a 1/4 seam allowance. And we are going to start in that one little bit right there. Like I said, make sure this is stuck down. Okay, so follow me over to the sewing machine. Okie dokie, so we're at the sewing machine. Like I said, we're going to start right here. So I'm just going to get that. This is just here literally just for marking purposes. So it doesn't need to be here. It's literally just a marking spot. So I'll get my needle in and then I will get rid of it. And like I said before, again, Jassy does do it the other way around, so lining side up. This is just how I like to do it. You don't have to follow me. You can do it the way she does it. It's just, I've done it a few ways now, well, both ways now, lining side up and this way up. And I still always prefer having exterior side up if I can, okay? So we are top stitching, so it is a 1/8 seam allowance. Now this top stitch is, I don't want to put pressure on anyone, but it's obviously like a final stitching of your bag. Yeah, I think top stitching is one of the most important aspects of a bag and how it looks, how professional it looks. So take your time, don't race it, just, yeah. You might need your hump jumper. If you do, just make sure it is at the ready. I think I might have skipped a stitch on that one, so head back in. go. I don't know how much of that speed was noticeable to you guys by the time I edit the video, but I actually hand crank through a lot of that, not because of the bulk or my machine's ability to handle the thickness, but because it just, I like to listen out, to be honest. I'm listening out for skip stitches, and I like to just take it slow because, like I said, like top stitching is one of the most important parts. So you want it to be done nice and beautifully. So now that it's done, I'm just going to flip it over to this side, and I am just going to pull our thread tails through. One thing that I should have mentioned before, I'm very careful about it, so I know I wouldn't get them. But one thing to be very wary of and very careful of when you were doing that top stitching is your side gusset, making sure you don't accidentally sew that down while you were top stitching too. Okay. Yep. So like one thing that you could have done, I should have said this before and I didn't, sorry. One thing that you could have done if you're worried about sewing into this line is you can actually just fold these corners down and keep them out of the way so that it won't get stuck in your stitches, just like that, and stick it down that way. That way, as you sew, it won't get caught. But yeah, that's what we can do. Okay. So, what am I doing? Tied the line. Oh, there was a tip and a hint in there that we can actually tie and then thread it back through our fabrics if you're worried about the knot. I'm not so worried about my knot because, to be honest, this is the bottom of your zipper pocket. That's why we've chosen this spot. On the other side, you can't see really, can you see that? Can't really see the joining bit. So, yeah, so I just tie it and cut it off. Okay. I think we might move over to the overhead before we move on to the next step. I think that's going to be the easiest way. Okay, yep, let's head back to the overhead. Okie dokie, we're so close. We can actually see the finishing line now. So if you wanted to close it up, you can actually see what your Ellie wallet looks like. She's really pretty. I am loving this. Anyway, but what we're going to do next is actually insert that zipper pocket. So, sorry, I'm just flattening everything up. So go ahead, we're going to grab our zipper pocket that we made before. Now, some of you notice that I am horrendous at cutting threads. So what I am going to do now is cut off all of my loose threads along the zipper pocket, as well as on these side gussets. I've got threads everywhere, so quickly get those all tidied up. It's easier to tidy up now rather than later. The reason why I don't tidy these threads up beforehand is because sometimes this is all sewn up in one day, which is fine, whatever. But sometimes you might take a little bit longer to get back to sewing, like if you had to have like a little break or something. And I found I like to keep longer tail ends on these raw edge top stitches, just so that the stitches kind of hold a bit better. You're less likely to lose stitches if you leave longer thread tails until you sew. Okay, there you go. Perfect. So, okay, cleaned all that up. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to get some double-sided tape again, and we're going to stick it on our zipper pocket. Now, if you like, you can stick it on both sides of it. I tend to only do one side because, like I've said before, double-sided tape is really expensive here, the good stuff. So I try to be quite stingy and conservative with it. So I'm just sticking it on this one side, which is actually the wrong side I wanted to stick it on. Whoopsies. Okay. So I want to stick it on the other side. Well, it's stuck down now, so I guess I'm doing it on both sides. No more being stingy for me. Oh, I'll just do it on both sides on that one. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Pretend I didn't stick on that other side. I like to normally just stick on the one side. Okay. And then what we're going to do next is we are going to mark on these side gussets. I only mark on the top one. 1/8 in from the edge. It's really hard to see my markings, but it's just roughly there. And what we're going to do is we're going to stick the zipper pocket down along that 1/8 marking. So that's my double-sided tape. I like to have my zipper closing on this direction. And then I'm just matching the bottom and then along that 1/8 there, just like that. And then if you did double-sided tape on both sides, you can go ahead, undo it, and you can stick that down over here as well. If you didn't use double-sided tape, which I normally don't do, just put some clips on it to hold it all together. And we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew this together first with a 1/8 seam allowance and then with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we're going to do the same over on this side. We're going to pull this over here, stick it down to that line and close that up. I'm actually going to stick this down here now. Because I've done this a few times, I find it quite easy to just do them both at the same time. If this is the first time that you are doing this method, definitely do one side then the other, so that way you can have more give and pull as you do this section. But I am doing this to save having to come back and forth to my overhead and clipping table. So let's head over to the overhead and the sewing machine, and let's get that sewn together first with a 1/8 and then with the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, let's head over. Okie dokie. So I'm playing bobbin race here, so wish me luck. Okay. We are going to go in first of all with a 1/8 seam allowance. Okie dokie. And then, so the second line of stitching now at the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Go. And then the other side, like I said before on the overhead, the other side you might be doing it now and sticking it down now like you did the first side. I've already pre-stuck mine down over when I was doing the first one because I am too lazy to go back over there. But let me move this out of the way a little bit more, give you guys some more space. So the main thing after you've done this side, the main thing with doing this side is you just have to pull a bit more, okay? And this has come off a little bit, which is fine. I just need to stick it back down, make sure these are all clipped into place and it's where I want it to be. Which it's not. See how it's just moved a little bit? So that's why it's better to do one side before we do the other side. So if you were pre-clipped like me, just make sure you double check it. And the trickiest thing is, I don't know how well you guys can see this. So this is sewn in now. So because it's sewn in, there's not as much give on this side. So you just have to take your time, maneuver it to get it to stick the best, okay? So double-sided tape definitely does help this process, but like I said, I am a cheapskate when it comes to double-sided tape, so it's just not happening. Okay, there we go. So I know on the instructions and on the first side, I did do a 1/8 inch first and then the 1/4 inch. For the second side, I actually like to do the 1/4 inch first, and the reason being is the 1/4 inch is the one that actually catches the zipper pouch. So if I do the 1/4 inch first, it just helps me capture it and make sure that it's all sewn on first, because that's the important one, is sewing it down, right? So that's what I am doing. I'm doing the 1/4 inch. And then as I pull it out from the 1/4 inch, before I do the 1/8, because again, like I said, like this is probably the trickiest part, is making sure that this is caught, which it is. And it is well and truly caught, not just by a tiny bit, because otherwise it might just pull out if it's only caught by the tiniest little bit. And then we're going to go back in and we're going to do the 1/8. There we go. Here we go, clean this up. Now, if you are not doing grommets, you are technically all done, and we can just jump right over to the goodbye segment. But if you are doing grommets, stick around with me. We'll head back over to the overhead and quickly get those grommets sorted. Okay, so let's go. Okay, so if you are installing grommets, here we are. So I do use a little hole press to install grommets. So my the cutting holes is dependent on the size of your grommets as to what size to cut. I do use a table press. I personally highly suggest, if you intend on doing a lot of grommets, definitely worthwhile investing in the grommet press and the handheld table press, because I never managed to get a nice grommet, to be honest, without the table press. Okay, so where are we going to install it? So we are doing halfway. We're marking the center point. These are going to roll off my table. Hold up. Oh. We're marking center point between the ID slots and your side gussets. So that's there. And then we're going in. So I go in by about a quarter, maybe slightly more, because I want it to be quite close to the edge when it's done. But I also don't want it to cut my threads, okay, my top stitch. So I kind of draw a spot roughly where I think it is. So it is centered. So the center part's the important part. And then how far in is really very much based off, where that cut is going to be. So I apologize in advance if you see my head, because my head is going to have to be quite close as I watch where my grommet hole is cutting. Oh, I hate that grommet hole cutting noise. It always scares me. Okay. Over on this side. Perfect. There we go. So that's a cut. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to install the actual, the actual grommet. And again, like I said, I use a press. So I'm just getting the pressy bits installed. So grommets are actually pretty easy to install with the press. You just need to buy the right size grommet adapter things. Sorry, I am horrible with knowing what names are called. And the right side hole. And then it's pretty much just the pretty side goes on the exterior. And then you've got the washer on the interior. You put it onto the press and then you just press down. And it should install it beautifully, hopefully. There we go. And that's that side installed. And then same on the other side. There we go. Ta-da! And there we have it. So, all done, just like that. So like I said, I've got the grommets on it so that it could be used as a handbag. I just need to make a strap, and then this can also become a little crossbody bag. You got your magnetic snap opening, your 2 clear pocket for your IDs or photos, a slip pocket behind it. Over on this side, you have a slip pocket. You have 12 card slots, 6 on this side, 6 on this side, and a zipper pocket as well. There we go. That's your Ellie all done. Ta-da! And there you have it. That's our Sewfisticated Ellie Wallet by Sewfisticated Craft Designs all done. I have had an absolute ball sewing with you guys, so thank you so much for joining along with me. If there's any products that I've mentioned in the video that you are interested in, there are links in the description below. Some of them are affiliate links, so I may receive small payments for them. So if you do purchase anything from them, thank you so much from me to you. If you enjoyed watching this and you'd like to see more, please make sure you subscribe to my channel as well. But that's it. It's Sam from Made by Erlen. It was so much fun sewing with you guys today, and I'll see you next time.